So recently I got the results back from a few tests that I took measuring my body composition on one of those devices where you stand on a pair of electrodes, you have a handle that has some electrodes in it, and it passes a small current through your body. And these are called bioelectrical impedance analysis devices. A bit of a mouthful. And here are the results from the 3 tests that I took. So there are a few things that you will notice. 1, it's all in German, but I will point out the things that you need to know. 2, between the 3 tests, I lost 1% body fat and gained 500 grams of muscle. Pretty good going. And the last thing is that they were all taken within 4 minutes. Now, I'm fortunate that I have access to one of these where I can take multiple tests, but normally when you're offered a test on one of these devices from your gym or a healthcare center or something, you only get a single test. Now imagine that I took these measurements a month apart to test if all of the hard work and training and dieting and stuff that I had been doing had been working, and whether I should keep using that approach. You know, a 1% reduction in body fat percentage as well as 500 grams extra muscle is a pretty good result. Imagine I did that, but when in reality I hadn't actually made any progress over that month and the program I was using hadn't been working and it was just a measurement error from the device. Or conversely, imagine that the error had gone in the other direction and I'd taken this test and it showed no change when really I had made changes and the approach I was working. And you know, maybe I abandoned the approach or go to try something new, even though what I was doing was already working. Now, the inaccuracy that you see with my results is not just a one-off, but this is an inherent problem with this sort of body composition test. Now, one study found that this sort of body composition test underestimated most participants' body fat levels, and that's the weight of their body fat, not just their total body weight, by about 8 pounds or 3.5 kilos. And many of the participants by over 10 pounds or sort of 4.5 kilos after a 6-month weight loss period when compared to a more accurate test. Another study on bodybuilders who tend to have a more consistent diet and training regime found that body fat percentages had an error of up to plus or minus 8%. To give you an idea, say that somebody takes that test and they are actually about 12% body fat, which is considered sort of beach lean for a male. So you've got some muscle definition, probably a visible six-pack. Now 8% less, so error, if it had underestimated, would equal a body fat of 4%, which for a male is, you know, potentially putting you at pretty serious medical risk. And you only ever really get there by a few bodybuilders will do it for a short period of time. This would probably be the leanest person you have ever seen, and most people will never see somebody that lean in real life. Now 8% error the other way, from 12% up to 20%, is a very different story. So this is what I call fluffy. So you probably have no abs, maybe a little muscle definition if you are quite muscular, but this is sort of like a dad bod. You're not chubby or like have much of a gut, but you're just sort of fluffy. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, if I was beach lean or as lean as humanly possible, or had a dad bod in the other direction, I'd probably be able to tell the difference a little bit more accurately than that. And you'd be right. And these are just a couple of studies that I picked as an example, but there are hundreds of studies out there, some showing even greater margins of error. Most of the time using some progress pictures, maybe some circumference measures, how your clothes are fitting, taking some skin folds are going to be a more accurate way to assess body changes in yourself. Now what these BIA devices are actually measuring is electrical impedance when it passes the current through your body. Now impedance is a similar concept to resistance and is about how well electricity flows through the different tissues in your body, and that depends on how well hydrated they are. Now muscle is generally better hydrated than fat, and therefore electrical currents pass more easily through it. So if the electrical current passes more easily through your body, it assumes that you have more muscle or other well-hydrated tissues and less body fat. But there are many other things that affect your body's impedance. For one, how well the electricity passes from the electrode into your body makes a difference. And this is affected by both the thickness of the skin on your hands and feet, as well as the moisture between you and the electrode. This is what I think actually threw off my measurements on the day. I think after standing there with my arms out to the side as you have to in a slightly warm room, that I was getting slightly clammier between the tests, and therefore there was a little bit more moisture on my skin, between my skin and the electrodes, and just moisture on my skin in general. Therefore the electricity was passing through my body a little bit more easily, and therefore the machine was estimating that my muscle mass percentage was higher, and therefore my body fat percentage was lower if my weight had stayed the same. In case you were wondering, I took all of the recommended precautions of fasting for a few hours beforehand, not exercising for a few hours beforehand, and being normally hydrated, using the wet preparation wipes that help you to get a good contact between you and the electrode. Because these are all things that can throw it off if you have different food in your gut, if you're more or less hydrated, if you have localized swelling in your muscles caused by exercise, these can affect how well you conduct the electricity. But my guess is you probably don't care what the average result from everyone in your gym is. You want to know what the results are from all of the hard work you've been putting in to assess whether what you've been doing is working or whether you need to change. So when BIA devices are used to give individual results, say like before or after a 6-week challenge, they are really more of a gimmick just to give you some numbers to look at. In fact, they're not really just not useful, they're probably misleading. Like we talked about from the size of the errors, you could actually get the wrong result pointing in the wrong direction. So not only could it say that you've made more or less progress than you thought you made, it could actually flip the other way and say you haven't made progress when you have, or you have made progress when you haven't. Nothing is more frustrating than doing a diet, sticking to your training, feel like your clothes are feeling better, you think you look a little leaner in the mirror, maybe the scale weights come down, and then you look at your BIA results, which you assume are accurate, and maybe they're telling you something different. And you start to question, is what you're doing actually working? So what should you do instead? Well, precisely what I just described above. Often these other simple metrics are a much better way of determining your individual results as you go. Are your clothes fitting better? Now, clothes are just a piece of material with a bunch of preset circumferences around your body. So using either that or actually just taking some circumferences with a tape, a really good way of assessing changes as you go throughout diet and exercise. Now, if you'd like a guide on how to take and interpret body circumference measurements, let me know and I will create this as a future post. Progress photos are a great tool for assessing changes in your physique because they're measuring what we actually care about. Are you getting bigger in the areas that you want to be bigger? Are you looking smaller in the areas that you want to look smaller? Overall, do you prefer this look to where you started? Well, if you've got physique-related goals, then physique-related changes are really all that matters. Now, this comes with a slight caveat that body dysmorphia is real. Sometimes you are not the best judge of your own physique changes, and so getting a second opinion from a coach or a physician or a trusted friend can be a really good idea. Your body weight on the scale is actually a pretty good indicator of what's going on as well. And one main reason for this is because you will generally lose fat much faster proportionally to how fast you can put on muscle. So if the scale weight's going down and you're working out, then you're probably losing fat and you might be gaining a little bit of muscle as you go. Now, if the scale's going up really fast and you feel like you're looking a little bit less lean and you're either not making too much progress in the gym or you're not working out, then you're probably in a higher calorie surplus than you need to for getting muscle. You're probably gaining a bit of fat along the way, and this may or may actually be the goal for you depending on your context. Skin folds are another really good measure, like circumferences, for measuring body composition changes. Now, what they're measuring is subcutaneous fat, so that's the fat directly under your skin, but not in your body cavity around your organs. And so we're assessing it in a certain area. Now, for accurate measurement, it's best to get somebody who's trained in this so that you can get the same technique and consistent pressure for each measurement, as well as using the same sites. Now, don't bother converting these to a body fat percentage because that just adds an error. What you want to do is take the sum of these folds. So say if you take 4 different sites and it adds up to about 200 millimeters overall, and then you remeasure in a couple of months and it adds up to 140 millimeters, then you've literally lost body fat thickness at those sites. Now, you can also just use a pinch test as a rough gauge. Say if you pinch around your waistband and there seems to be less in between your fingers than there used to be, then it's probably a good indication that you've lost a little bit of subcutaneous fat there. Now, the best way to use these measurements is to actually use them together as sort of points for or against a result. Now, what I mean by this is, say for example, your scale weight's down, your skin folds have decreased, but you haven't really seen a difference in your progress photos yet. You've sort of got 2 points for and 1 point against, so you're probably making some changes in the right direction. Now, if they're all pointing in one direction, then you can be pretty sure that what you're doing is moving in the direction you want it to. Now, in summary, I wouldn't really bother with BIA body composition tests or any other sort of body composition test, to be honest, because the margin of error is just too big to be useful when making decisions on individual changes. And if it's not useful for making decisions, then it's really just an expensive piece of paper. If you'd like to read more into both BIA and other methods of assessing your body composition, then check out the series on weightology by James Krieger. I will tag him somewhere in this. Now, if you would like help using and interpreting the assessments that I do recommend, as well as how to change your diet and training to actually get the results, then message me and I will help you figure out what your next step should be.